today's show, Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report joins the program. We talk all things Blazers present and future. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. Just kidding. It's August, baby. We made it. 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, all August long and into the first couple weeks of September, but still make it your first listen when it's out there and available for you as Locked On Blazers, your team most freaking days still. In today's show, we're joined by friend of the program, Sean Highkin, beat reporter for the Rose Garden Report. It can be in your email box if you subscribe. How you doing, Sean? Welcome to the program.
I'm good, Mike. I love a low stakes off season. I love. I'll tell you this. When you texted me like late last week to ask me to do this, this was the first podcast of any kind that I have been asked to go on this off season. A
little bit
when
different.
You think about where things were a year ago, it was not just, local. I mean, I've done some radio stuff here in Portland on 1080 and 620 and, all the local stations. But last summer, it was just every national show needed to have someone on to talk about the Dame stuff. And then I do it. And, there wasn't really anything new to talk about for most of the summer because, as you know, he requested the trade on July 1st and the trade happened on September 27th. But people still kind of needed stuff to talk about. And then it got to a point where I kind of started saying no to some of them because just every single thing I said would get clipped and just, spread around in Miami. And then I'd get all that. By the way, all those people put all that energy last summer into clipping every single thing that any of us in Portland said about that situation. Put all that time in, all that work in, really just grinded that whole summer. And the Heat didn't even end up getting Dame. Like, that's tough.
It's true. It things change, but now they haven't. Now the Blazers kind of had a sleepy summer. Let's start there. What do you make? They've made one move this summer. They a pre-draft trade or agreed to prior to the draft, finished after the draft technically, but pre-draft trade to get Deni Avdija. What do you make of their one move so far? Let's start with the move itself, and then we'll talk about sort of maybe the lack of action beyond that.
Well, one out of the veterans, you kind of go into the summer, into the off season, and there was kind of a whole list of guys that aren't, on the rebuilding timeline. And so you're talking about, Malcolm Brogdon, Jeremy Grant, who I'm sure we'll get to, Anthony Simons, Matisse Thybulle, Robert Williams because of the injury stuff. There's like a list of 5 or 6 guys that you go into this offseason thinking, oh, they might move these guys. The only one of those guys that I felt like from the beginning they had to move, and just there was no way he could go into training camp as a member of the Portland Trailblazers, was Malcolm Brogdon. That was the one where he was going into the last year of his contract. So if you don't trade him before the deadline, you're going to lose him for nothing. The amount of money that he makes is, not really commensurate with a backup point guard that when you want to have, Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe getting a lot of the minutes on, in the backcourt, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if they had a roster spot, which they don't right now, to get some sort of a veteran, backup point guard like that, but maybe not one that's making $22 million. And also Malcolm Brogdon is still good enough that, he ended up in Washington, and we'll see if he sticks there long-term. But my feeling before that trade happened was that, a veteran team that's trying to compete for the playoffs, Malcolm Brogdon is still good enough and still productive enough that that's the kind of team that could use him. So that was the one guy going into the offseason and going into the draft that I felt like they have to do something with Brogdon. That's the one guy that the offseason will be a failure if they don't do something with. And they did. And honestly, and we talked to, I've only talked to Deni Avdija once, which was when he did his little introductory media thing after the trade became official. And he was saying that, he was shocked that he was traded because the Wizards had told him that, he was going to be part of their plans going forward. And I'll admit, I had the same reaction when I saw the trade come through. I had no idea that Deni Avdija would be available, or that was somebody that was even attainable, or that was somebody that they could maybe get. But, when you look at the archetype of what is this team missing, and what sorts of, when you look at, just not just the skill set stuff, because, we'll see if the shooting that he had last year, shot 37% from three, which is a career high. We'll see if that carries over. But, the playmaking stuff for a guy his size, the defense stuff at the wing, like that's the spot that they kind of needed to fill long term. And so you talk about bringing in a guy who is 23 on a really good contract, like off his rookie extension. I think the exact number is, 4 years, $50 million, but it declines each year. So it's a really good deal. That's exactly the kind of guy that they should have been looking to bring in, and the kind of guy that they have been looking to bring in every time they've fielded offers for any of their veteran guys. So I think there was really not a lot not to like about the move that they ended up making.
So, okay. I think that the price for Denny seems about right. Like he's like you said, young player, 23 years old, really friendly contracts. It's like the last year of his deal is like under $12 million. Like that's going to be a wild cheap price for like a starter level player.
Uh-huh.
So you're making less money than like the 16th pick in the NBA draft at that point. But I think to me, it was surprising that the Blazers were the team that paid that price. The Blazers were the team that paid, 2 firsts and 2 seconds and a veteran. Obviously, it seems like Malcolm Brogdon didn't have a ton of standalone trade value maybe in the end. What do you make of the Blazers being the team that sends out picks as opposed to like, I do think Joe Cronin has said we want a player not to get draft picks. What do you make of them in the position they're in being a team that sends out future draft picks? To me, it's peculiar.
Well, when you look at the actual picks that were sent out, like, the second round picks, like you saw the Blazers trade one of their second round picks this year for 3 second round picks. Second round picks are basically fake. I don't even like consider that a real thing. One of the 2 first round picks that they sent out was the 14th pick in this draft, which is a draft that we had spent the whole spring talking about how, this isn't a very good draft. And, people were talking themselves into some of the guys that were maybe going to be available at that range, like Tristan Da Silva or
Kel'el Ware, baby.
Kel'el Ware, sure. Whatever, any of those guys. But I think it would probably be most people listening, and I'm sure you would agree that Denny Avdia is a better player than anybody they could have drafted at 14. Would you agree?
Yeah, he's certainly the chances that he's better than Bob Carrington this year and all 4 years of his deal is pretty high. But that's a little bit different. That's a little bit different of the calculation than the draft pick, right? Because people
see the phrase like, they traded this many draft picks, and and it just kind of becomes this whole, because everybody's like obsessed with what Sam Presti did in Oklahoma City, or like what Utah is doing, and just volume of picks over quality of anything. And then the other one I think was the second most favorable of their 3 picks in 2029.
Right.
So like they'll still have 2 picks in 2029.
Right. Sure.
Like I don't. I mean, when you break down what, like you see that on the page where it's, wow, they gave up 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Denny Avdia, and it's like they gave up 1 first in a draft that they didn't really like anybody at 14 anyway, and 1 that's 5 years out in a draft where they're already still going to have 2 first round picks for a guy that fits positionally and is better than anybody that they could have gotten in the draft. Like, I get where kind of that reaction came from, but I thought it was a reasonable trade to make, and I think it was the better. It was as good as they were going to do with Malcolm Brogdon, I thought.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I think very fair price, all things considered, for Denny Avdia. I'm surprised the team that paid the price was the Portland Trailblazers, fresh off a 21-win season. Yada yada yada. Okay, so Denny was the move, and then the rest of the headlines of the season is like, there weren't any other moves. Let's talk about that in the second segment, because what we have is one thing, and then we have we'll talk about the inaction, the patience, and all of that in the second segment. Join us there, won't you? But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime, the place for last-minute tickets. Up to 60% off the list price when you get last-minute tickets. It's a place that rewards procrastinators. What I really like about Gametime is that it's super clean app and it's easy to use. You open up the app, make a couple clicks, whatever you want to go see, sporting events, live concerts, comedy, whatever it might be. The venue pulls up right on your screen. You can see exactly where your seats are going to be. You can even click on the seat and say, like, give me a view from my seat, so you can visualize what it's going to be like if you're more of a visual learner. Plus, what you see is what you get pricing. So whatever you see on the screen, if that ticket's going to cost you $54, $50, it's going to cost you $54. It's super simple. Plus, they got flash deals, last minute boost. You can even get last minute tickets after the game has started if you really want to try to save some money and you're a true procrastinator. So take the guesswork out of buying last minute tickets. Go download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, super simple. Create an account, download the app, create an account, and then use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. It's Gametime. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, still chatting here with Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report. Sean, Denny was the trade. They make their move. They get a guy. He fits. I think he's going to be really helpful on the court. He's under contract for 4 years. You get to grow with him and all of those things. But the other trades, you mentioned the names: Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, to some extent Matisse Thybulle, to some extent Rob Williams. Where are the moves, Sean? Why haven't we seen the fireworks? And I don't think it's unique to the Blazers, but in your opinion, why haven't we seen more action?
Well, it's a couple of things. For one, to your point, it's really around the league that you're not seeing these teams give up this crazy amount of stuff for some of these guys, like because of the stuff that's going on with the new CBA and like all those second apron rules that are getting phased in. You're not really seeing the types of deals where, if you're a team like Portland, you're interested in, what are they interested in? They want good draft picks, not just draft picks for the sake of picks, but good picks. And or cost controlled young players that they think are core pieces, which was what they ended up getting with the Denny Avdia trade. But teams are kind of not wanting to give that stuff up because the CBA has made it so prohibitive to go over those different thresholds of the luxury tax. And this, I made this point in a column I wrote last week, but that the Spurs paid Victor Wembanyama like $12 million in his rookie season, and they're gonna pay him. I think the highest his contract gets up to is $16 million in his fourth year before they have to give him the max. But when you have a chance to have a guy that maybe is going to be the best player in the NBA before the end of that rookie contract, if Wemby keeps developing the way, people think he's going to, you can't give that up. And, that's even true of below like the Wemby level. That's like an extreme outlier where it's like the best prospect since LeBron. When you have a chance to have a guy who can be cost controlled for 4 years, as the spending restrictions and the payroll restrictions and the things you can do with your roster are so, tough to navigate for a lot of these teams. It's the same reason the Blazers ended up not trading the third pick last year, when that was a thing that they were talking about doing to get Dame some more help, whoever those guys ends up being. I think the thing they ended up, coming down on when it came down to make that decision was
they never wanted
having
to keep
somebody
Dame in
at
the
that.
place.
What'd you say?
They never wanted to keep Dame in the first place. That's the thing they came up against.
That's something that some people think, but
that they wanted to, that the rebuild could finally launch. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I digress.
But they kind of decided that, the opportunity to draft somebody who could be that good, and I think that's, I'm sure we'll get to Scoot's rookie season and expectations for him going forward, at some point while we're doing this, but somebody that was thought at the time to be that level of talent and have him under contract for 4 years at a really cheap number compared to what, somebody like that would cost in the open market. That was too good to pass up. And I think as the Blazers are looking at gauging the trade market for, whether it's Anthony Simons or Jeremy Grant or any of these guys, other teams are feeling like, I don't know if we want to give up all this future draft capital. Like you're looking at, what the situation that Phoenix kind of got themselves into, where they gave up everything for Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, and now they have a roster that costs a ton of money and are just, could end up being like a play-in team basically at this point. Like the teams that end up doing that under this current system, like it doesn't really. And so the Blazers are in a position where they're not going to just trade, and whether it be Anthony Simons or Jeremy Grant or any of these guys who are good players on good value, like the Jeremy Grant contract, it seemed like a lot when they signed it, but compared to some of these other deals that are getting signed, and especially when the cap, continues to go up, like that's not a negative value contract. And the Anthony Simons deal is definitely a positive value deal, but
the thing with Ant is not long enough. Like it's only 2 years. So
well, and also I think also just like his archetype of like small scoring guards, like that's just the value isn't really there for that. But so To answer your question, the reason there hasn't been a ton of moves is because teams out there are not valuing those guys and, the other guys that the Blazers theoretically could trade this at the level that the Blazers are. And we just saw Joe Cronin last summer wait the entire summer with the Dame thing was a little bit of a different thing because of all the external stuff, but he waited the entire summer until he got the deal he wanted and until a team met his asking price. And that's the approach he's taking with these guys. He's not under any rush to trade any of them. Like I said before, the one of these guys they absolutely had to trade this summer was Malcolm Brogdon, and they did that. Like, they don't have to trade Jeremy Grant. He's got 4 years left on his deal, and he, as far as I know, is happy here and isn't like itching to leave and itching to get out. And Simons, I'm pretty sure the same is true as of right now. So there's no rush on any of these guys. If they don't get an offer that they like, they're not going to just move these guys out just to move them out.
Do you think there's urgency to get it done at some point this year? Like, do you think I would say my misread on Cronin most consistently has been my urgency, or maybe anxiety is maybe a better way to explain it. My anxiousness for them to make moves hasn't really lined up with his timeline. I would say I was like, they have to trade Malcolm Brogdon at the trade deadline, and they didn't. I would say when they didn't trade him at the trade deadline, I don't think they got a ton of value for him. But do you think there is, like, noting what we've noted, right, is that the trade market has been a little quiet. Obviously, there hasn't been moves of larger dominoes like Brandon Ingram and Lauri Markkanen and all those things. Do you think the Blazers are, do you think they would like to come away having moved both vets, or one or both vets, Anthony Simons or Jeremy Grant, by the trade deadline? Or do you think they're comfortable, like, really saying, let's roll this thing out as long as we need to?
I think they can string it out one more year if they need to. I think they'd like to not, but I don't think it would be the end of the world if they did. I think with Jeremy, and I realized that the Lakers stuff has just kind of been getting recirculated on Twitter this week because I
was on Locked On Lakers today. If you're last week, no, when you're listening to this, I was on Locked On Lakers last week talking Jeremy Grant, baby. It's back in the zeitgeist. So yeah,
because it's deep in the off season, and people need stuff to talk about, and these. I saw one a couple days ago where it was not even like the NBA Central or one of the big aggregator accounts, but it was like one of the like second or third tier like aggregator accounts. Aggregating report the Lakers offer for Jeremy Grant was whatever, and the source that they were citing was not even a reporter, it was just like some guy tweeting this is what I would give up for Jeremy. That's where we're at, and because of that, and because everything in the current era of Twitter with the current person that owns Twitter and how easy they made it to just spread stuff, it's just gotten to where people have no discernment over any of this stuff. And so because of that, the Jeremy Grant Lakers stuff has kind of just, come back up in the surface because there's not a whole lot else going on. And that's, the Lakers are always going to drive engagement because they're the most popular team. But if you're Joe Cronin, why wouldn't you wait it out? Maybe the Lakers before the end of the summer get desperate and offer both of those first round picks for Jeremy Grant. And if they do offer both firsts, I think you have to take that. And I think they would if they got that offer, but
I might do it for one of those unprotected. If fully unprotected 2029 first from the Lakers, I'm a believer that the Lakers are going to stink. I think they're going to stink post LeBron. So,
but why do you have to do it right now? We're recording this on July 29th. Why do you have to do that right now? It's the exact same thing. There were so many people all last summer saying, oh, they need to just take whatever they can get from Miami and just not let the Dame thing drag. It ended up working out for them that they waited and didn't do that. I think that the school of thought here with their front office is that they want, they value guys the way they value guys. I think with Jeremy Grant, it's clear at this point that the price for him that they would like to get is 2 firsts. Whether they'll get that or not, I don't know, but that's what they would like to get. So why would they trade him for less now? If it comes time down the line that they have to, that maybe they will, but why would they do that right now when maybe in a couple of months or even at the trade deadline, one of these teams, really needs an upgrade or decides that this is, you look at what Dallas just did this past trade deadline where they got PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford and went on this run and ended up making the finals. Some team at the deadline could convince themselves that Jeremy Grant is their PJ Washington and decide it is worth giving up 2 first rounders. And if you just did it for 1 first because some people on Twitter got impatient for somebody to just make a move just because they want to feed the news cycle, then you're kind of out of luck.
Sure. But isn't the counter argument to that is look what happened to the Bulls is that there is the sort of the graph of patience cuts both ways, like you get to there is like a perfect part of the parabola that you would like to hit right in the middle, but there's certainly going too early could get you a worse deal, but like going too late, like waiting a little bit too long is maybe like attaching 2 firsts and 2 seconds to Malcolm Brogdon. It's like you're not going to get the most standalone value. You might end up getting a deal, but I think the key is, and I'm not saying that like the late July is the key, right? It honestly might be February, but I think there is like a lesson to be learned in like there is a level of patience where you are over the waterfall and you can't come back. And I don't actually think that's with Jeremy necessarily because of the length of his contract. I would be more concerned about it with Anthony Simons because after this year, he's an expiring contract, and expirings are just different. It's just a different thing to trade. There is a world in which expiring contracts have value if the Blazers are willing to take back bad money, but it's like, I don't think they've shown a great appetite to do that. Not in their current salary situation.
Not unless they get really, really good, whether it's a young guy that they really like or really good draft picks. That's I think the situation.
Right. Or if they could get way cheaper, right? If there was other deals that would allow them to not be on the books for Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton and have like be able to be a cap space team. But that's right. A long way away. That's a long way away.
I agree with you about the Simons thing, and I will say it and I know this has been talked about by everybody, but it did not go unnoticed by me on draft night when Joe Cronin said we're committed to building around Scoot and Shaden as our, as the guys that we want to be a part of this. And I picked that up. Like I was in the room. I was at that press conference. As soon as he said that, my eyes like bugged out of my head. That did not get past me even in the moment. So I think long-term they're going to have to figure something out with that, but I don't think that's one you have to do right now if the value isn't there. Maybe that's one I think you could string out to the deadline if you need to.
Let's talk about the core. Let's talk about the young core and the future and how it all fits together, because I think they're in a curious spot with that. Join us in that third segment, won't you? First, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, still chatting here with Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report. So the Blazers, right now they've got their young guard trio. And one thing I really like, and Sean, you'll appreciate this, is that when you get the sort of summer power rankings blurbs from various people who do summer power rankings blurbs, it'll say things like, the Blazers are committed to building around Anthony Simons, Scoot Henderson, and Shaden Sharp. And every time I read that sentence, I'll say, are they? Are they? Because I don't think they are. What do you make of that, right? Like, it seems very clear that over the last 2 drafts, the Blazers have this is just, I think, a fact. They've invested a lot of sort of organizational investment, developmental currency into Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson. That is how they view the backcourt of the future. Where does that leave Anthony Simons? What do they do with him? And do you think they have shopped him or gauged his trade value this summer?
I don't think he's untouchable. I don't think they're actively calling up teams saying, hey, what do you give us for Ant? But I don't think they're shutting it down if teams are calling about him. I haven't been able to discern what teams have called about them. There, I can think of a couple that just me doing, the exercise Orlando obviously makes a lot of sense. That's the one that gets talked about a lot. San Antonio, I think, would make some sense. Like there's a couple of others that aren't coming to me right now, but I don't think they've been actively saying, hey, what do you give us? What do you give us? Like, we're taking offers right now. Give us your best offer. And whoever gives us the best offer gets him. But I think if just with any of these guys, I don't think they're doing that with Jeremy Grant either. I think with any of these guys, if they get an offer that they think is good enough, they'll take it. And really for anybody on the roster outside of the guys that we know for sure are, part of this young core that they are talking about wanting to build around. That like any of these other ancillary guys, some of the guys we haven't talked about yet, Matisse Thybulle, Robert Williams, that's a little bit more complicated because of the health stuff and teams don't really know where he's at. But just any of these other, secondary guys, especially kind of the higher salary guys, like I think they'll listen to offers for any of these guys, but I don't think they're actively saying, hey, we need to move any of these guys before the summer is over. So just give us your best offer and we'll take something.
Yeah, certainly I think we have enough evidence on how they operate is that they're going to be patient unless it's trading Norman Powell. And then they're going to do that a week before the trade deadline. Get his ass out of here. Otherwise, pretty patient. In fact, like even the CJ McCollum rumors, it was like New Orleans is interested in CJ McCollum. And like a month later, it finally came to fruition. Like it wasn't like a thing that they were like, hey, let's get this done right away. They kind of made sure they got the deal that worked and got the exact size trade exception they needed to get Jeremy Grant and like had all their ducks in a row. They're a ducks in a row ass franchise. That's why I think
what is Joe Cronin's background? What was his role on, under previous front office?
Scouting and player personnel. Yeah.
He was also the cap guy.
The cap and then eventually the cap guru. Yeah. Famously credited, I think one of the only times that Neil Olshey credited one of his people who worked for him publicly, he credited him with finding the Hassan Whiteside trade. Is that a creativity when they needed Hassan Whiteside? He said Joe Cronin found that because Miami needed to shed some money to add, get really good. And the Blazers needed a center because of Yusuf Nurkic's health. And they found the Myers Leonard, Mo Harkless deal. So
it's actually Asia Jones that does their cap now that Joe has the big job and isn't, doing that full time.
I will say we haven't heard Joe shout out. He did specifically thank the staff, but not like this deal was crafted by type of trade.
He's run down the whole list, like a few different press conferences. I remember on draft night in 22 when they drafted Shade and he basically named his entire front office staff. Yeah. I remember at the time I was like, I don't think I've ever heard the previous general manager of the Blazers mention another member of the staff by name in any way.
Hey, no, Joe Cronin, specific credit for Hassan Whiteside. I remember it well because it was funny in the moment. So I guess like with this, like they're going to be patient. They're going to, they'll eventually get there trading the vets one way or another. Or 2 summers from now, Anthony Simons will walk and it'll be funny. I don't think that'll happen.
I don't think so either.
I wonder this season, kind of knowing what their goals are and like their willingness to be patient. And I will say, reading your work at the Rose Garden Report, you can subscribe to it on Substack, get it in your email inbox. It's Sean he's got your nuts and bolts reporting. If you're going to want to know what the deal is, Sean's going to tell you what the deal is. But how do they measure success this year? Like, what does success look like? If you're kind of in between eras and obviously like you don't really want to win that much, like how will this team measure success?
I think there's a couple of things that you look at because obviously, I mean, there's the cynical part of you that wants to say, you measure success by being bad enough to get a high 14 enough lottery wins pick to be able to get Cooper Flag or whatever. I mean, like they're like throw that part of it out of it. One thing I'm not worried about with this team under this current regime is their ability to lose however many games they need to lose to get to wherever they need to get to. The one thing, I mean, the 2 things I think this front office regime has really proven that they're great at. One of them is finding value in the draft. I think they have a pretty good track record at that. The other is making sure that when guys need to have some sort of, and that didn't really happen as much this year as it did the previous couple of years when they were like signing G League guys like on the last day of the season or whatever. But like finding ways to make the lineup and the available players such that you get where you need to get in the lottery standing. So I wouldn't worry about these guys like accidentally making a play-in push and being too good. Like that's not going to happen. They're going to be, I'm not going to sit here on July 29th when we're recording this and say, they're going to have a top 3 worst record in the league because they're going to have some stiff competition there, like Detroit, Washington, Utah's going to be in the mix, Brooklyn. But they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be, when you talk about the teams that the whole year everybody knows are trying to be in that conversation to have one of those top, positions in the lottery, that they're going to be in that mix the whole year. So if you're worried about that, you don't need to worry about that. As far as how they
Yeah, I would agree. The shameless losing is something that they definitely are good at.
Yes.
But go on.
As far as how you measure success, I think there's two things that fans would look at and say, this was a good season. One of them, and this is to a degree not super controllable, and they just had a ton of bad luck last year, but you want to see guys stay healthy enough to actually be able to play together. To me, the defining stat of last season is that the 5 most important players on the Blazers roster, which were Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, DeAndre Ayton, and Jeremy Grant, were all together healthy and available in the same game 4 times last season.
The team went 1-3 in those games, in case you're
they
scoring
did.
Yeah, but 4 games. It's nuts.
Their 5 most important guys played 4 games in a season where, even though the goal was to lose a lot of games, you still want to see the guys that theoretically are a part of the future. You want to see them actually healthy and playing together. And Shaedon Sharpe has the core muscle surgery. He misses, most of the second half of the season. You want to see him and Scoot actually get to play together and develop something together. You want to see, DeAndre Ayton develop something with Anthony Simons, which we didn't get to see for the first 6 weeks of the season because Ant tore his thumb in the first half of the first game of the season against the Clippers. You want to see the important guys actually stay healthy and play. That's one thing. So if they have better injury luck than they did last year, that's one thing that I think people will consider a success. And then the important guys, the important long-term guys, and in this case, I would say that would be Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Donovan Clingan, and I guess Danny Avdija now because they made that trade for him. And those are the 4 guys that I think are, the most likely to still be here in 3 years and still be, part of whatever the next iteration is. You want to see a meaningful improvement from those guys. Now with Scoot, I think people were pretty encouraged by what they saw maybe the last 6 weeks of last season after he had a pretty rough start to his rookie year. You want to see that carry over. You want to see either the shooting or the finishing or both kind of improve and have that be a consistent thing. With Shaedon, Shaedon honestly was playing pretty well before he had the core muscle injury. That was a guy that I think in the first, quarter of the season seemed like he was making the kind of leap that people thought maybe he was going to make. So you want to see him stay healthy and do that consistently through a full season. And then, you want to see how well Clingan fits. You want to have some answers on some of these guys by the end of the season. I would say is probably the most succinct way of putting it. Is you want to go into next summer because whatever happens with the lottery, you can't really do anything about that. If they win the lottery, they get Cooper Flagg, then they're in great shape. They're the new Spurs. They're gonna be set for 10 years if he's that good. Whatever. You're not gonna know that until next May. But whoever you end up getting, whether it's him or you get one of these other guys that's supposed to be not quite as good but almost as good, one of these other potential franchise guys, you get one of the top 5 or 6 guys in the lottery. You want to know what you're going to put around them and which of these guys are long-term guys and which of them aren't. This past year, there was still a whole lot of, these guys were hurt a lot of the year. We don't really know what Scoot is. We don't really know what Shaedon is. We don't really know what a lot of these guys are or how they fit together. You don't want to be sitting here next April at exit interviews and have Joe Cronin saying, we still don't know what a lot of these guys are. We still need more data on this stuff. At some point, you have to make decisions on a lot of these guys, whether you have the data or not. And so you'd prefer to have the data. That's kind of where I land on it.
I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Is the clock's ticking regardless. Mm-hmm. And they really didn't learn anything last year. So this year, the key, and I couldn't agree with you more on this. The key is to learn what you have. Good, bad, whatever. You need to have some knowledge. You need to, when that break between April and May, you need to, regardless of where you land in the lottery, you need to kind of know what you need and what you got, because they didn't know that this year. And I think that's a big challenge for them. Sean, would you be willing to stick around and come back for Wednesday's program?
I could be convinced.
All right, let's do it. It's Sean Highkin week here at Locked On Blazers. Come back for Wednesday's show. Sean and I are going to talk about the youngsters. That's Scoot Anderson, that's Shaedon Sharpe, that's Donovan Clingan, and others. Tamani Kamara, Ryan Rupert. We might touch on all of them. Come join us for that one. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.